October 6, 1943, Blackett Strait, Solomon Islands. The sea is as black as tar, swallowed by an impenetrable blanket of clouds. A Japanese destroyer, the Amagiri, slices through the night at 30 knots, its engines thundering. The crew smokes casually on deck, unaware that this peaceful evening will soon turn to chaos. Then radar contact, 800 yards off the port bow, something small, something fast. Probably debris, someone mutters. But that radar return moves, faster than anything that should be there. And suddenly, 3 streaks of white foam cut through the water like claws in the night. Torpedoes. And behind them, an 80-foot silhouette charges head-on at 40 knots. The destroyer's guns open fire, but they're too slow. In less than 90 seconds, the sea erupts. Explosions, screams, chaos. Everything the Imperial Japanese Navy believed about naval warfare was shattered in those moments. The attackers weren't cruisers. They weren't submarines. They were patrol torpedo boats, plywood, gasoline, and raw American audacity. Small, expendable, and until now, dismissed as mere nuisance weapons. But that night, the nuisance became a nightmare. The Japanese destroyers never expected this. They designed their ships for armor and artillery, but not for speed, not for chaos. But at 40 knots, the rules of the sea no longer applied. In the Pacific, America's shipyards were brimming with steel, battleships, cruisers, destroyers. But none of those could fight the kind of war the islands demanded. The Navy needed something faster, cheaper, something that could fight in shallow waters and disappear before the enemy had a chance to react. So, engineers at Higgins Industries and Elko set to work. The result? A strange-looking 80-foot wooden boat that looked more like a speedboat than a war machine. It carried 4 torpedoes, a few machine guns, and a crew of 12 men. The Navy called it the PT Patrol Torpedo Boat. The men who served on them had another name, the Plywood Coffin. The early missions were disastrous. Mark 8 torpedoes misfired, ran too deep, or were spotted too soon by the Japanese. Against armor-plated destroyers, the boats splintered like matchsticks. Skeptics scoffed, calling the boats a publicity gimmick. Even Navy destroyer captains joked, "Let the PT boys have their fun. They'll be gone before sunrise." But in Detroit, something was happening that would change everything. Packard Motor Company, the same folks who built engines for racing cars and P-51 Mustangs, was developing a monster, a 12-cylinder marine engine capable of 1,350 horsepower. By mounting 3 of these engines side by side, the PT boat's combined output reached a jaw-dropping 4,050 horsepower. And that's when plywood turned into a weapon. At full throttle, the new PT boats could reach 41 knots faster than any destroyer, faster than any Japanese escort ship, and fast enough to outrun even their own torpedoes. The Pacific had never seen anything like it. But speed alone wasn't enough. The Americans would have to develop new tactics to make these fragile boats destroyer killers, and that was coming next. In 1942, the Imperial Japanese Navy's doctrine was built on one thing: pride. The dream of a decisive battle, the legacy of Tsushima and their fleet of giants. Heavy cruisers, torpedo destroyers, and the magnificent battleships Yamato and Musashi. In this doctrine, small boats were nothing but toys useful for guarding harbors or chasing smugglers, not for challenging the Emperor's destroyers. When they first heard about America's patrol torpedo boats, the Japanese officers laughed. They called them mosquitoes. Annoying, but harmless. Reports described the boats as wooden, weak, and unreliable. "One hit," a Japanese captain joked, "and they'll burn like kindling." But what they didn't realize was that these small boats were evolving faster than anyone in the Pacific. Each failed mission was a blueprint for the next attack. PT boat crews began to coordinate their strikes in teams. One boat would draw the enemy's fire, while another circled wide for the torpedo strike. By the time Japanese destroyers began to take notice, the PT squadrons had turned the night sea into a trap. Japan had built its war plan around one massive, decisive battle. Instead, it was dying by 1,000 wooden cuts, and speed was no longer just an advantage, it was a new kind of weapon. October 6, 1943. The Solomon Islands were a graveyard of ships. Locals called it Iron Bottom Sound, a name earned from the wrecks scattered across the ocean floor. That night, 4 American PT boats, PT-59, PT-157, PT-162, and PT-170, waited in ambush. Their mission: intercept Japanese destroyers running supplies down the Tokyo Express, the high-speed nighttime convoys keeping Japan's island garrisons alive. The sea was pitch black. Engines idled at low speed, barely whispering. The crews were ready. Then, just after midnight, radar picked up faint echoes, fast-moving, powerful signatures cutting through the channel. Japanese destroyers. The Americans knew what that meant. Within minutes, the searchlights and 5-inch shells would light up the sky, but this time the PT boats didn't scatter. They attacked. Within moments, the PT boats reached their targets. At just 1,000 yards, PT-170 unleashed its torpedoes, followed by PT-162. Seconds later, an explosion lit the night. The Japanese destroyer, Yugure, 2,090 tons of steel, was lifted from the water, snapped in two, and sank within minutes. 26 minutes. That's all it took. For the first time in history, a wooden boat had destroyed a fully armed Imperial destroyer in open combat. This victory stunned the Japanese High Command. How could a boat made of plywood and gasoline defeat a destroyer forged from steel? The answer was simple: speed, coordination, and nerve. From that night onward, every Japanese destroyer captain knew that the real threat in the Solomon Islands wasn't aircraft or submarines. It was the silent, invisible PT boats racing through the water at 40 knots and vanishing just as quickly. This newfound fear would change the entire rhythm of Japan's operations in the Pacific. The once proud Tokyo Express was running on dread, and the consequences were profound. Cut off from supplies, Japanese island garrisons began to starve. While the PT boats didn't destroy everything outright, they isolated the enemy, strangling the flow of resources. One PT boat cost a few $1,000s and 12 men, one Japanese destroyer, millions of dollars, and a full crew of over 200. The lesson for Japan was clear: speed and adaptability were the future of naval warfare. In war, the smallest boats left the deepest wakes. The legacy of the PT boat wasn't just in the victory it secured, it was in the fear it instilled and the strategic shift it forced. Japan had measured strength in tonnage, but America measured it in throughput. As the war continued, the PT boats proved that innovation could turn the tide of war. Their story is a reminder that in warfare and in history, victory doesn't always belong to the biggest, it belongs to the fastest to adapt.